The late afternoon sun, a painter's stroke of gold and rose, streamed through the arched windows of the ballroom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, forgotten stars. I sat at table 8, my hand gently resting on my grandson Leo's small back as he meticulously maneuvered his cherry-red toy car across the pristine white tablecloth. His soft, whispered vroom, vroom was a tender counterpoint to the distant hum of conversation and the light clinking of silverware. He was 7, a whirlwind of boundless energy and profound quietude, and the center of my universe. Beside me, my adopted daughter, Lucy, elegant in a simple beige dress, leaned over, her voice a soft melody. "Eat another little piece of bread, my love," as she broke off a crust for him. My heart, a vessel often filled with a melancholic ache since Maria, Alex's first wife and Leo's mother, had left us too soon, felt a momentary warmth. Lucy and Leo were the persistent, flickering flames that kept our family's hearth from growing cold. Alex, my son, a man reborn in the crisply tailored navy blue suit, moved through the tables, his laughter echoing, a vibrant, almost unfamiliar sound. His smile, broad and unrestrained, seemed intent on erasing the shadowy years that followed Maria's untimely death. I watched him, a bittersweet cocktail of pride and a lingering sadness swirling within me. I wanted to believe in his new happiness, to trust that Ava, his new bride, a dazzling vision in her beaded wedding gown, would be a new dawn for him, for all of us. But every time my gaze snagged on Ava's as she laughed a little too loudly for the cameras, her wine glass never far from her perfectly manicured hand, a familiar unease, a small, sharp thorn pricked at my heart. Her smile, though flawless, felt like a meticulously crafted mask, too perfect to be entirely real. The jazz band played a gentle, flowing melody, a soothing current beneath the lively chatter of the guests. Waiters moved with practiced grace, serving delicate appetizers, crispy crackers, an aromatic cheese dip, and elegantly garnished plates of fresh shrimp. I noticed Leo push the shrimp plate subtly away, his small nose crinkling. "Don't you like this, my love?" I whispered, a frown touching my brow. He merely shook his head, avoiding my gaze, a silent, almost secretive gesture. I wanted to press him, to understand his sudden aversion, but a relative leaned in, jovially remarking, "And Leo's behaving so well, Betty. Look how big he's gotten." I offered a strained smile, murmuring a polite reply, but a knot of worry tightened in my stomach. Leo had never been particular about food, especially not in such a strange, quiet way. In the distance, I caught Ava's eyes flicking towards our table. Her perfect smile seemed to falter, just for a split second, a minuscule tremor that no one else would have noticed before she smoothly turned back to another guest, her laughter ringing out once more. I tried to dismiss my apprehension, telling myself I was being overly sensitive, a protective grandmother seeing shadows where there were none. But then, in an instant, everything shifted. Leo, still engrossed in his toy car, pushed it a little too hard. The little red vehicle rolled off the edge of the table and disappeared into the dim space beneath. The boy quickly crouched down to retrieve it, and then he froze. His eyes, usually so bright and full of innocent wonder, widened in stark terror, fixed on something hidden beneath the crisp white linen. A shiver of dread traced a cold path down my spine. I leaned closer to him, my voice hushed with concern. "What is it, sweet pea?" But Leo didn't answer. With trembling hands, his face pale and stark, he pulled out a small piece of paper, folded precisely into quarters. His little fingers, ice cold against my skin, gripped my hand tightly. "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now," he whispered urgently, his voice a tiny, frantic plea. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "What's wrong, my boy?" I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady, to project a calm I did not feel. But Leo's panicked gaze, wide and brimming with unshed tears, stripped away my composure. Trembling, he repeated the question that would forever echo in my memory, a cold, sharp knife to my heart. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" His words, a chilling accusation, paralyzed me. Slowly, deliberately, I crouched down, lifting the heavy white tablecloth. My eyes scanned the dark, shadowed space beneath. There it was, the small, folded paper lying innocently next to his chair. A harmless piece of stationery, yet in that moment it radiated a sinister menace. My hand shook as I reached for it, the world shrinking around me until only Leo, myself, and that damned paper existed. I unfolded it, the dim candlelight on the table casting a ghostly glow on the scribbled words. "Table 8, add shrimp to the child's serving." A few words, but they were an electric shock, searing through my entire body. I crumpled the paper instinctively, the crisp edges biting into my palm. The music, the laughter, the joyous din of the wedding, it all dissolved, sinking into a terrifying abyss from which I couldn't escape. Ava, in her resplendent wedding dress, continued to laugh in a distant corner of the ballroom, raising her glass in a toast with a guest, as if nothing in the world could ever touch her perfect happiness. Alex, my son, was engrossed in photos with his colleagues, his radiant smile a testament to what he believed was the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that ballroom had become a grotesque farce, a shimmering curtain drawn over a terrible, unfolding truth. I squeezed the crumpled paper, feeling its edges burn against my skin. Leo, my precious grandson, the boy I loved more than my own life, had almost become the victim of a depraved plot orchestrated on his own father's wedding day. My gaze fell upon Lucy, my adopted daughter, who sat beside Leo, her eyes filled with a dawning concern as she witnessed the horror etched on my face. "Take care of Leo, please," I choked out, my voice thin and reedy, unable to hide the profound tremor that ran through me. Lucy nodded, her strong arm wrapping protectively around Leo, pulling him close, a living shield against an unseen threat. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice low, laced with a quiet anguish. I could only shake my head, unable to articulate the raging storm within me, unsure of my next move, only certain that I had to act. My legs felt heavy, as if weighted with lead, yet my heart pounded, a relentless drumbeat urging me forward. I pushed through the throng of guests, their happy chatter a dissonant symphony to my mounting panic, and emerged into the quieter hallway. Near the bar, a group of waiters stood chatting, their laughter a stark, painful contrast to the tempest raging inside me. I recognized David, a young man with a kind face and a friendly smile, who had served our table several times. In that moment, however, I saw only a potential link to the nightmare I had just uncovered. I strode directly to him, thrusting the crumpled paper into his bewildered face. "Do you know who sent this paper?" I demanded, my voice firm, though it trembled with a suppressed fury. David's face, instantly robbed of its carefree smile, contorted into an expression of abject panic. "My God, this is my paper," he stammered, his hands shaking as if he wanted to snatch it back to erase its incriminating presence. "A woman gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray." His words, though a shard of light in the confusion, only intensified my agitation. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, my voice rising, losing its composure. David recoiled, bewildered. "I don't know her name, ma'am. She just told me to give it to the chef. The paper didn't say who sent it." Rage, pure and blistering, exploded within me. All the more reason, I hissed, stepping closer, my voice vibrating with a dangerous cocktail of anger and fear. My grandson is severely allergic to shrimp. A single piece could kill him. David paled, his eyes wide with horror, shaking his head frantically. Ma'am, I really didn't know. I just followed the note. I had no idea about anything. His voice cracked, a plea for understanding, as if he too were caught in this unfolding nightmare. The other waiters began to whisper, their gazes darting between David and me, a mix of curiosity and growing concern. I clutched the paper, feeling its edges burn my skin. I wanted to scream, to shatter the elegant illusion of this wedding, but I knew I had to maintain control for Leo, for my family. From inside the ballroom, the upbeat voice of the announcer cheerfully declared that guests should prepare for the main course. His words were a cruel reminder that time was running out. If I hesitated, a deadly trap could still claim Leo. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing my trembling body to stillness. I knew I couldn't stay silent. If I didn't act now, I would never forgive myself. I returned to the ballroom, the crumpled paper still clutched in my hand, irrefutable proof of a sinister design. The room was still bathed in candlelight, the jazz band's melody weaving through the murmur of conversations. Waiters glided silently, serving the main courses, the rich aroma of roasted meat and gravy filling the air. But for me, it was all a macabre charade. I sought out Leo, huddled next to Lucy, his clear eyes, wide with fear, fixed on me as if I were his only beacon in the heart of the storm. I took Leo's small hand, feeling his trembling fingers in mine. Then, as if an invisible force propelled me, I stood up abruptly. My voice, though trembling with indignation, resonated clearly and firmly above the music and the conversations, cutting through the festive din like a sharp sword. One moment, please, before we begin to eat, I have something to clarify. The entire ballroom fell silent. Time seemed to stop. All eyes, suddenly fixed and unblinking, turned towards table 8 where I stood with Leo beside me and Lucy, a spark of fierce determination in her eyes, seated next to him. The gentle clinking of glasses ceased, the murmurs died down, and in that profound silence I could only hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. I held up the crumpled paper, its scribbled words an undeniable accusation. Who wrote this paper, asking for shrimp to be added to the food of the child at table 8? I demanded, my voice quivering with raw emotion, yet forcing itself to be clear and sharp. Whispers like small waves on a suddenly calm lake rippled through the guests. Some looked at each other, shaking their heads, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. I felt Leo's innocent gaze fixed on me, a silent plea for protection. Alex, my son, rushed over from another table, his initial smile of happiness dissolving into a mask of deep concern when he saw the anguish on my face. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, completely bewildered. I didn't answer him immediately. I simply placed the crumpled paper on the table and pushed it towards him. "Read it yourself," I said, my voice harsh, though inside I felt utterly undone. Alex picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the words. I watched as his face drained of color, his hands beginning to tremble almost imperceptibly. "What does this mean?" he whispered, stunned, looking from the paper to me, then to Leo, as if searching for a logical, merciful explanation. Ava, in her magnificent wedding dress, approached, her brow furrowed with a perfectly feigned surprise. "What is all this? Some kind of bad joke," she said, her voice soft, but I caught a fleeting flash of panic in her eyes. I met her gaze directly, my heart a raw knot of anger and fear. "My grandson is allergic to shrimp," I declared, my voice trembling with indignation, with absolute certainty. This is not a joke. This is an attempt at murder." My words fell like a thunderclap, plunging the ballroom into a deathly silence. Some guests' mouths dropped open in astonishment. Others began to whisper, their eyes darting between Ava and me. Ava forced a brittle laugh, a fragile mask to maintain her composure. "Excuse me, Mrs. Williams, but there is no name on the paper. Are you going to believe a story that a child who found it made up?" she said, a mocking edge to her tone, attempting to portray me as a paranoid old woman. A few guests began to murmur doubtfully. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding," one whispered. "Who would do something like that at a wedding?" Another added, disbelief coloring their voice. The blood boiled in my veins. Ava's audacity, her brazen denial, left me almost speechless. I wanted to scream, to tear away her wedding dress and expose the venom beneath, but I knew I had to remain calm for Leo, for my family. Suddenly, Lucy stood up, pulling Leo even closer, her eyes blazing, fixed on Ava. "That's enough, Ava." Her voice, though low, was cold and sharp, brimming with an unspoken pain, as if she could no longer contain herself. Lucy stepped forward and slapped Ava, a sharp, resounding smack that echoed through the stunned ballroom. The dry, cracking sound broke the fragile silence, shattering the last vestiges of falsehood. Everyone froze, including me. Ava clapped a hand to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock, then turned to Alex, sobbing theatrically. "You see, she's crazy with jealousy, and that's why she's attacking me. What have I done to deserve this?" Lucy did not back down. Her fists were clenched, and her voice, though broken with rage, was steady. "The only wicked person here is you. You wanted to harm an innocent child at your own wedding." Her words were like a dagger, cutting through the heavy air of the ballroom. The looks of doubt began to center on Ava, and I saw her freeze, her false smile finally faltering, cracking under the pressure. Alex stood motionless, his gaze flickering from me to Lucy, then to Ava, as if trapped between two warring worlds. "Lucy, calm down," he said, his voice trembling, but I saw in his eyes that he was no longer certain whom to believe. The murmurs of the guests grew like a rising tide, carrying all eyes toward me, toward Ava, and toward Leo, my little grandson, who now trembled openly in Lucy's protective arms. Ava tried to maintain her false calm, but I saw her hands shake as she spoke. "This is slander. I'm sure someone put that paper there to ruin our wedding." Her voice was sharp, but I detected the rising panic in her eyes, her perfect mask finally beginning to crumble. I couldn't endure her audacity any longer. The anger inside me exploded like a consuming fire, burning away all my patience. I slammed my hand hard on the table, making the glasses jump. "That's enough." I shouted, my voice so cold and commanding that it silenced even the faint strains of the jazz band. "David, come here." The young waiter, David, approached from a corner, his face pale with fear, his eyes darting nervously from side to side, trapped between the truth and the storm that now raged openly. I held out the crumpled paper to him, my voice trembling but firm. "Confirm it. Is this the paper you received?" David nodded repeatedly, stammering, "Yes, ma'am, it is. A woman from the other table gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray." He lowered his head, unwilling to meet my gaze. I felt my blood boil anew, but I forced myself to remain calm, acutely aware that every eye in the ballroom was on us. Ava hurried to interrupt, her voice sharp, almost desperate. "You're mistaken. I don't know anything about that." But before she could continue her frantic denials, a weak voice, heavy with pain, was heard from behind her. Gloria, Ava's younger sister, burst into tears and stood up from her chair. "It wasn't my sister Ava who gave me that paper," the young woman sobbed, trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I didn't know what was inside." A gasp of astonishment rippled through the ballroom. "My God, I can't believe it," one guest whispered. "How is that possible?" I looked at Gloria, my heart softening. She was barely 18, her eyes red and full of genuine confusion, as if she too was a victim caught in this cruel nightmare. Ava spun around abruptly, her face disfigured with a venomous anger, and yelled at her sister. "Shut up, Gloria. How dare you make up lies to harm your own sister?" Her voice was sharp, but I saw her lips tremble, a desperate struggle to conceal the truth. Gloria recoiled, trembling from head to foot, and said between sobs, "I'm not lying, sister. I just did what you asked." Her words were a final dagger, piercing Ava's facade of innocence, leaving the entire ballroom in a state of profound shock. A close elderly relative shook his head, his voice choked with disgust. "How is it possible to not even spare an innocent child?" In the midst of the chaos, Lucy stepped forward, hugging Leo even more tightly, and declared in an icy, unwavering voice, "If you keep denying it, we can ask to check the security cameras in the ballroom. Everything will be cleared up in a moment." Her words landed like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples of panic that spread across Ava's ashen face. Her lips tightened and her gaze desperately sought an escape, but there was no escape now. She said nothing more, and her silence, for me, was the clearest, most damning confession of all. Alex froze, his hand trembling on Leo's shoulder, looking in horror at the woman he had just called his wife. His voice broke as if he were trying to cling to the last, desperate hope that it was all a misunderstanding, but his eyes, darting from the incriminating paper to his trembling son, betrayed the painful truth. I watched as his heart broke, just as mine had when I first uncovered the plot. An uncle stood up, shaking his head in disgust. "It's unbelievable. Such wickedness on a day of celebration." His voice trembled, barely containing his indignation. After Lucy's challenge about the security cameras, a deadly silence descended upon the ballroom. Ava, the woman I had once tried to accept into our family, stood there, her face pale, her lips pressed into a tight line, desperately searching for one last excuse. But the truth was exposed, naked and undeniable, and she had nowhere left to run. Alex, my son, walked slowly towards her, his face taut with tension, his eyes red-rimmed, and asked in a strained whisper, "Ava, tell me the truth. Is it true?" His voice trembled, a raw plea for a glimmer of hope that it was all a mistake. But I knew that, deep down, he, too, felt the agonizing bite of the truth. Ava took a step back, trying to force a twisted, almost grotesque smile, but her eyes, wide with panic, betrayed her. "You don't believe me," she said in a broken voice, as if trying to cling to the last drop of Alex's trust. "It's all their plan. I didn't do anything." But her words sounded weak, like a dying wind before an unstoppable storm. I looked at her, my heart heavy with a potent mix of indignation and profound sorrow. This woman, whom I had hoped would bring my son happiness, now stood before me like a stranger, a dangerous shadow I had failed to perceive. Lucy, my adopted daughter, placed a comforting hand on Alex's shoulder and spoke, her voice strained, held back with immense effort. "Leo almost died because of this woman." Her words, sharp as a knife, sliced through the tense air. Ava shrieked desperately, "Shut up, you're just a jealous intruder." But Lucy stood unmoving, trembling with a controlled rage, a steadfast shield for Leo. "How dare you call me jealous?" Lucy retorted, her voice now icy. "Look this child in the eyes and tell me you didn't try to hurt him." Leo clung to me, his small hand squeezing mine, as if he feared being dragged into the heart of that nightmare. Guests began to rise from their chairs, the festive atmosphere utterly shattered. A relative of our family, Mr. Johnson, slammed his hand on his table in anger. "This is a disgrace. We can't let this go." Murmurs of support rippled through the crowd like waves that grew and threatened to drown Ava in a sea of contemptuous gazes. Alex, caught between the brutal truth and his vanished love, cried out, his voice broken with pain and indignation. "Leo is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words were a direct stab to Ava's heart, and I watched as she finally burst into tears. But those tears, I knew, were not of repentance, but of being exposed, of utter defeat. I placed the crumpled paper on the table, its damning words visible to all, and declared in a firm, unyielding voice, "Anyone who tries to harm my grandson will never have the right to set foot in this family." My words resonated, clear and absolute, like a final judgment. Ava looked up, her eyes blazing with a desperate, defeated fire. She had lost, not just to me, but to the undeniable truth. Hotel security personnel approached and in a polite but firm manner asked Ava to leave the ballroom. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said, his voice cold and official. Ava recoiled, searching desperately for help, for a sympathetic face, but no one came to her side. Many guests shook their heads, leaving their half-empty glasses, sighing with a mixture of resignation and horror. "Unbelievable," one whispered. "How can someone be so cruel?" Another murmured, visibly shaken. Alex stood motionless, his hands clapped to his head, as if trying to prevent his world from completely collapsing around him. Then, as if he no longer possessed the strength to stand, he slowly knelt in front of Leo, his voice choked with remorse. "Son, forgive me, my boy, for not protecting you." I saw tears stream down his cheeks, and my own heart broke in two, for him, for Leo, for all the pain we had endured. I helped Alex to his feet, squeezing his shoulders, and said in a grave but confident voice, "Luckily, we stopped it in time. This false happiness has to end here and now." I looked at Ava, being escorted out amidst a chorus of contemptuous stares, and in my heart I knew with absolute certainty that she never was and never would be a part of this family. In the days that followed that nightmarish wedding, our family was caught in a silent whirlwind, where wounds still bled and unanswered questions floated heavy in the air. I felt as if I had just awakened from a terrifying nightmare, one in which I had almost lost Leo, my grandson, whom I loved more than life itself. The story of the failed wedding spread everywhere, from the hushed conversations in our small suburban streets to the distant whispers of relatives. The house phone rang incessantly. Some blamed Alex for blindly trusting Ava, others sympathized deeply with Leo, the innocent child who had almost become the victim of such a cruel plot. But for me, every call, every sympathetic word was just another painful reminder of the trauma we had endured. Alex became withdrawn, a shadow of the radiant man in the navy blue suit from the wedding day. Instead, he took Leo to and from school in silence every day, his gaze filled with a profound pain and guilt. The name Ava, like a curse, was never mentioned in the house again. I looked at Alex with a pained heart, but I knew he needed time to heal, to find himself again after being so cruelly betrayed by the person he had chosen to love. I didn't blame him, understanding that love could blind even the most discerning, but I also knew that our family had to rise from these ashes. I continued to care for Leo as I had since Maria's passing. I cooked his favorite dishes, cheesy pasta, a soft pudding, trying to restore a sense of security and normalcy to his fractured world. But who truly began to heal Leo's fragile soul? It wasn't me, but Lucy, my adopted daughter. Every morning, she would carefully prepare his school lunch, meticulously choosing foods without shrimp, ensuring nothing could ever again endanger him. She would even tuck in a small, crayon-drawn note for his teacher, explaining Leo's allergy, accompanied by a smiling face which he adored. "Aunt Lucy, you draw so well," Leo would exclaim when he opened his lunchbox, and I would see his eyes light up, a precious glimpse of his lost innocence returning. Every afternoon, Lucy would take Leo to the nearby park. I often watched them from a distance, observing as she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string just so, allowing it to soar gracefully towards the clouds. One day, Leo stumbled and fell off the slide, and Lucy, with a mother's instinct, ran to him, scooped him up, brushed the dust from his clothes, and whispered, "It's okay, my love, I'm here." Leo's clear, bell-like laughter echoed through the park, a sound I thought I had lost forever, and which was now like a soothing balm to my weary heart. I looked at Lucy with infinite gratitude. She was not only a loving aunt, but also a second mother, slowly, gently filling the immense void that Maria had left behind. One night when Leo had a high fever, I watched as Lucy spent the entire night by his side. She sat on a chair next to his bed, placing damp cloths on his forehead, her soft voice quietly telling him the story of a brave sparrow that flew through a fearsome storm. I stood at the door, watching in silence, and it was then that I noticed Alex's gaze. It followed Lucy for a long, quiet time. It was a complex look, filled with gratitude, with remorse, as if he was only now realizing something he had stubbornly ignored for far too long. I didn't say anything. I simply retreated, giving them their space. But in my heart, a tiny, hopeful spark ignited, a belief that perhaps there was a light at the end of our family's long, dark tunnel. One evening, during one of the rare dinners where we were all gathered around the table, savoring the warm pasta I had prepared, Leo suddenly looked up, his clear eyes fixed on Lucy. "I want Aunt Lucy to be my mommy," he said, his voice soft but clear, as if it were a truth he had carried within him for a long, silent time. Everyone at the table fell silent. Lucy blushed, lowering her head, gripping her spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. Alex froze, his eyes visibly moist, as if Leo's innocent words had touched a very deep, long-dormant chord in his heart. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and placed my hand on Alex's shoulder. "True happiness, son," I said in a warm voice, "doesn't come from a dazzling wedding dress, but from a sincere heart that knows how to love unconditionally." Alex looked at me, then at Lucy, and I saw a small spark of hope, tentative but real, begin to shine in his eyes. Time passed, and Ava, like a toxic, destructive wind, disappeared completely from our lives. Leo became a happy, vibrant boy once more, always attached to Lucy, his red toy car a constant companion, and the crayon drawing she had made for him carefully tucked into his school bag. I watched him run and play in the yard, feeling an immense relief, but also a pang of lingering pain, thinking about everything he had been forced to endure. One day, Alex took Lucy's hand. He stood before me in the living room, his voice trembling but firm with conviction. "Mom," he began, "I know I made a terrible mistake. I was blind. I put Leo in danger. But this time I don't want to let go of the person who has truly been by our family's side." Lucy lowered her head, her cheeks flushed, but I saw a radiant, undeniable smile on her lips. I nodded, tears silently tracing paths down my cheeks. "Son, the only thing I want is for you and Leo to be happy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. That night, after Leo had finally fallen asleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon cast its soft glow over the quiet street. Its gentle light was a poignant reminder that although our family had navigated through dark and turbulent days, light always finds a way to break through. I whispered to myself, family isn't always made of blood ties. Sometimes it's chosen, forged in love and courage. After that grim wedding, a new chapter, truly full of light and genuine affection, had begun for my family. I looked towards the yard where the kite that Lucy and Leo had flown the day before was still nestled against a bush. And I knew that although the old wounds might never fully heal, we would continue on together with love and strength as our unwavering support. Having gone through all this, I understood something profoundly important, that in life there are losses that cannot be replaced, betrayals that shatter the heart, but sincere, unconditional love will always be the enduring light that illuminates our way. Family is not merely built with blood ties, it is forged with choices, with the unwavering courage to protect each other from darkness and danger. It is sacrifice, kindness, and true affection that bring lasting happiness, not false appearances. Remember to listen, truly listen, with your heart as your guide, because sometimes a small gesture of attention, a whispered concern, can save a life. And it is kindness, above all else, that will lead us out of nights that seem to have no end.